Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. This is what to expect during your Stage 1 audit. My name is Joseph Krolikowski. I am the QMS Program Manager, among many other things, for Perry Johnson Registrars. A couple of notes here. All of our participants today are on mute. But we absolutely want to address your questions. So please utilize the question portion of the dashboard. We'll definitely address your questions at the end of the presentation. Now, one of the more common questions that we get is whether or not the slides will be made available and if this presentation will be made available. And we do provide both of those items. The slides will be available for download from our website probably about a couple of hours after we're finished. They'll be up in the webinar page. And if you'd like to rewatch this webinar with the voiceover, we do post all of our past webinars to our YouTube page, and you can find the link for that on the PGR website as well. Now, I will mention this particular presentation has been significantly updated today. So if you've joined us for this one in the past, we do have some changes to share with you. So our topics for today, we're going to go over why certification is done in 2 stages. And we're going to kind of take you through the process. We'll go through what happens at quotation, what are some of the pre-stage 1 events after you've signed a contract with PJR. We'll go through the stage 1 audit process front to back, so to speak. We'll talk in depth about the things that can prevent continuance to stage 2 and what you should do in responding to those things. And then we will have some time for your questions. So to begin with, why do we do this in 2 stages? Why is certification not just a one-step process? Well, as you might imagine, it's done this way because it is required to be done this way. PJR is an accredited certification body. We're actually accredited by multiple international accreditation bodies. And the level playing field, if you will, that all of those accreditation bodies hold us accountable to is the ISO 17021 series of standards. And in the -1 standard for 17021, there's a clause that reads as follows. The initial certification audit of a management system shall be conducted in 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2. Now, part of the logic behind that, part of the thinking behind that, is that an organization will only be permitted to go through the full audit, the multiple-day audit that usually is necessary for stage 2, if they can demonstrate that they have the most basic pieces in place. So you can kind of think of it as separating the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, in terms of who's truly ready for assessment. Now, first of all, before you can even go through a stage 1 audit, obviously, you must be a PJR contracted client. This is obviously necessary. So when we have a client come to us, like most organizations, we have an application for them to fill out. And our application, we have multiples of our application. These are all referred to as the F1 series of documents. Now, when you get a look at the F1, it is a complicated document. Most of them are at minimum 2 pages. There's a few of them that run to 3 and 4 pages. Lots of information, lots of things to fill in. And we do this with great purpose. We want to learn as much about you in the contractual phase as we possibly can. Obviously, we want to be competitive. We want to try to offer you whatever discounts we can within the rules. But the only way for us to do that is if we are gathering this information up front. So we do ask you to give us as much information as you can. Now, you may be wondering, where do audit time frames come from? How does PJR know that this audit is 3 days, this audit is 2.5 days, and so forth? Well, again, there is an internationally binding document that we are supposed to follow as an accredited certification body. And this time, it's the International Accreditation Forum Mandatory Document, or MD5. So MD5 is the document that we follow. It has the grid in terms of audit days and so forth. And it also talks about discounts that we can give on audit time. And there's different justifications for reducing audit time that we can utilize depending on the circumstances. MD5 stipulates that the maximum discount we can give is 30%. So in other words, if you have 100 people in your organization, there is a starting point for audit time, and you can reduce that starting point up to 30% if certain criteria are met. So we always like to instruct our clients, our prospective clients, that if you have a quote from PJR and you have a quote from a competitor, and the competitor's quote is just wildly different, you're going to want to be very careful about that, because it's possible that they are not abiding by the MD5 protocols, and therefore they may not be accredited. So we do always ask you to be very careful and be informed when you're being quoted by a certification body. Now, MD5 is a public domain document like any other IAF publication. And if you go to the IAF website, you can download a copy for yourself and read through the bylaws that relate to audit time. Now, once you are contracted, you will be assigned to what we refer to as an audit program coordinator. You will probably refer to this person as the scheduler. And your scheduler is going to probably be your primary point of contact here at PJR. Now, certainly any of us are able to assist you in any way, whether it be a technical matter or whatnot, but the scheduler is going to be your primary point of contact. Now, their primary function, obviously, is to assign an auditor that is going to be qualified and competent to perform your stage 1 audit and all of the audits that follow. Now, ideally, of course, they're going to try to find someone that lives close to you so that there's some savings in travel costs, but understand that they do have to ensure that the technical area competency is met as well. Now, one of the things that you will receive early in the process from your scheduler is going to be a document. It's going to be an F108. This is another document where we have multiples of these for the different schemes that we certify. So let's take a look at what the F108 series of documents is all about. Now, our F108 series of documents, you can think of this as an attestation. In other words, this is your proclamation and saying, okay, we've done all of these things, we've got all of this stuff together, we are ready for our stage 1 assessment. So what are the things that the F108 talks about? What are the things that you need to have implemented in order to be ready for stage 1? Well, let's start right at the top. You need to know what your scope is. You need to have defined the scope of your management system, including any exemptions or exclusions. You need to know what your processes are. You need to know how you're measuring the effectiveness of your processes. You need to have a fully implemented internal audit and a fully implemented management review activity. You need to know what's going on with your outsourced processes. You need to have your arms around applicable statutory and regulatory requirements. And you need to have the required documentation in place. Now, obviously, that's going to vary a bit from standard to standard, but most of the scopes that we certify have some documentation requirements that you need to fulfill. So the F108 is going to take you through all of those items, and it'll read a lot like a checklist. You'll basically say, okay, do I have these things in place, or do I have some work to do? in order to be ready for the stage 1 assessment. Now, the last item I've got on the bulleted list here is PJR form F191, and I actually have a couple of separate slides for that. So let's get to that item. Okay, now the F191 is a point of confusion for many of our clients. This is something that actually is sent to you by our contracts team. It goes out at the same time as your contract. So you get a bundle, all of this, okay, here's your documentation, you're now a PJR client, congratulations. And by the way, here's this grid for you to fill in. So it can be a little bit confusing what the intent of this document is. But it does have a very specific purpose. It's intended to help you ensure, and us ensure, that the processes you've established for your management system, that they represent a fulfillment of all the clauses of the applicable standard. So the idea is that you're going to use this document, this F191, to document what your processes are and then assign the clause numbers accordingly. And that this is going to work very much in sync with your interaction of processes. So let's take a look at this on the next slides here, a couple of slides. Okay, so let's say that this is your interaction of processes. And in the lower left, as you can see, we have 6 named processes. So those processes are sales order entry, purchasing, production, shipping, quality, and support. So these are your 6 processes. So what are you supposed to do with this F191 now that you've been sent? If we take the F191, we put the 6 processes on that left-hand side there in that column, and then you fill in the clausal grid and indicate, okay, these are the clauses that relate to this process, and so forth. Now, as you can see, a couple of things you can take away from this. Section 7.5 has been identified as applying to every single process the organization has. And that's easy to understand. Section 7.5 includes requirements related to documentation. So every process has something to do with documentation. Makes perfect sense. You can also see that column 8.3 has been left blank. We can take from this then that this organization is not responsible for the design of its products or services. You'll also note, I'm sure, that the support process is indicated as being applicable to every clause apart from 8.3. And again, that makes sense when you consider what was listed under the support. So the intent is that all of the various processes need to be accounted for on this grid, and all of the clauses need to have representation. So this again demonstrates to us you've implemented a fully effective set of processes that address all of the applicable requirements from the standard. That's the takeaway here. So once it's time for the stage 1 audit, we do still try to conduct these on-site wherever possible. It's still our contention that on-site audits are the most effective of the audits that we do. Now, stage 1 audits can be done off-site. Off-site means that the information is emailed to the auditor, everything is reviewed in a disconnected fashion. Those are permitted for ISO 9001. Understand that if you do an off-site stage 1 audit, it will most likely mean more overall audit time. And the reason for that is the MD5, the audit time requirement that we talked about earlier, that audit time requirement still has to be met. Off-site audit time is absolutely not treated the same way as on-site audit time. Now, before your auditor arrives, you should expect to be contacted by them at least a few days in advance of the audit whether it's going to be done on site or otherwise. And you should expect an audit plan. And you're going to want to review that audit plan to make sure that all of the details on the audit plan are correct, and let your auditor know if it isn't correct. Now, we also offer a virtual stage 1 audit option. If you're interested in a virtual stage 1 audit, you need to advise your scheduler, and they will walk you through the process of getting that approved. Now, when the audit begins, like any other audit, it will start with an opening meeting. This is a good chance for you to confirm any last-minute changes, to make sure your auditor is aware of critical information, visitors that you're going to have, personnel availability, and so forth. From the opening meeting, the audit will proceed according to the audit plan, and the auditor is going to use the Stage 1 workbook, and we do have a dedicated Stage 1 workbook to record the results of their assessments. Now, just about everything that we look at in the Stage 1 audit is documentation-based in nature. And the results of the Stage 1 audit are going to fall into one of two categories. It's either going to be indicated as conforming, or it will be flagged as a concern. Now, a concern is going to be anything that represents a disconnect between your implemented process and the related requirements from the applicable standard. Now, once the auditor has completed their review of the required materials, they're typically going to need some time to prepare their audit report, maybe 30 to 40 minutes at the most. There are no nonconformances issued in a Stage 1 audit. It's a very unique audit in that regard. The concerns that are identified certainly get written up in the report, but they are not formal nonconformances as they would be in any other type of audit. Now, once the report has been written, there will be a closing meeting to discuss the results. Now, there are 4 possible outcomes in a Stage 1 audit. The best outcome, of course, is that you are recommended for continuance to Stage 2 with no concerns. This is obviously the desired outcome. The more common outcome is recommended for continuance to Stage 2 with minor concerns, things that are not significant but should be shored up before the Stage 2 is performed. You may be recommended not to proceed to Stage 2 due to significant concerns, but without having a Stage 1 being repeated. This is actually a new option in our Stage 1 audit process. I'm going to be going over this in a couple of slides in terms of how this works. And then if things are significantly out of joint, it is possible that the recommendation will be for the Stage 1 to be repeated. Now, you will be asked to sign an acknowledgement of the Stage 1 results, and you will be given a copy of the completed audit report. Now, if your auditor has a tight travel schedule or other possible circumstances, it may be a few additional days before you receive the finalized audit report. Now, in terms of things that can prevent continuance to Stage 2, the interaction of processes, or IOP, is certainly an important item, a high-level item. And we certainly from time to time see issues with the IOP. It's possible, for example, that you have an IOP that resembles rather the PDCA diagram from the standard. You may have a canned IOP from a consultant that bears no resemblance to the actual processes. You may have an IOP that presents the sections of ISO 9001 as your processes. All of these are going to raise concerns for us. We actually have a whole separate webinar on this very topic. It's called The Interaction of Processes and Its Importance to a Successful Audit. If you check our YouTube page, we've given this presentation many, many times. I do recommend you check it out if you're still putting your IOP together. The IOP is viewed as the single best indicator that you understand the process approach prescribed in ISO 9001 and all of the other related standards. Another item that can prevent continuance to stage 2 is an inadequate set of process measures or missing process performance data. Now, bear in mind, ISO 9001 requires you to monitor, measure where applicable, and analyze your processes. So, therefore, every process on your interaction, on your IOP, needs to be monitored or measured. Now, there should be performance data available to prove that you're monitoring and measuring that information. Now, some of the standards that we certify have minimum requirements for the amount of data that has to be available. Now, for other standards, it's possible that just enough evidence be available to demonstrate that the process works. Also, some organizations may choose to have a few measures of effectiveness that they feel cover all processes. That's considered acceptable. You just have to be prepared to explain it. An item that can come up is if you've not done an effective job of defining internal auditor competency, or you don't have internal auditor competency records. Now, bear in mind, internal auditing is viewed as an activity of your quality management system, no different than any other activity. And therefore, it is your responsibility to make sure you've determined what it means to be competent to be an internal auditor. And we are going to be asking for proof that your internal auditors have met these competency requirements. Now, in some standards and in some industries, there's going to be additional steps that are required, but this basic competency point is universal, and it's something you can expect to be asked about. Okay, these next two slides are going to be very critical. If you have an inadequate internal audit, it can prevent continuance to stage 2. So what do we mean by adequacy? We need to see evidence that your internal audits are planned, that your audit reporting shows that all of your processes and related requirements were audited. If there were non-conformances, were they documented? Did you take responsive action on those non-conformances? Did you ensure that your internal auditors did not audit their own work? Now, as of this year, we have been forced to take a much harsher line on the internal audit process. This is based on accreditation body feedback. Any PJR client that can't demonstrate a fully implemented internal audit process will not be recommended for continuance to stage 2. This used to be different. This has been changed. Again, this is as a result of accreditation body feedback. The management review process is also very important, and it can also represent a barrier to continuance to stage 2. You need to make sure that the management review activity has been done and that it has met all of the required discussion topics, both inputs and outputs. One item that we see from time to time, organizations will put together a series of PowerPoint slides. That's great, but we need to know what was actually discussed, concluded, action items, etc., from the meeting as well. We need those outputs. And again, as of this year, we've been forced to take a much harsher line on management review. So if you can't demonstrate that you have fully implemented the management review process, you will not be allowed to continue to stage 2. So again, that's a new and enhanced requirement now. Now, all conclusions that are reached in a stage 1 audit are subject to review by a member of the executive committee. We do have an executive committee that reviews all audits to ensure that the auditor did their job, that everything was looked at, etc. Now, you are afforded the right to dispute or appeal the auditor's decision. Now that process is discussed in PJR Procedure Pro 10. Pro 10 is a public domain document. It's available right on our website. Just look for the link entitled Registration Document Download. Now, if the recommendation is to repeat the stage 1 audit, if the auditor has concluded that things are egregious and therefore we need to do the whole stage 1 audit over again, you will have the stage 1 audit report to work from. You'll be able to refer to it and say, okay, here's the things that I need to fix and work on. And you're definitely allowed to stay in contact with your auditor and with our team here at headquarters. If you have things you want to discuss, send us, etc. We'll help you make sure that you're on the right path to a better result during your repeat stage 1 assessment. You should expect to get a contract amendment from PJR for the repeat stage 1 audit. And in most cases, a repeat stage 1 is going to mean that a rescheduling of your stage 2 audit is necessary. It's almost always the case. This is precisely why we recommend a minimum of 30 days between stage 1 and stage 2. 45 or more days is even better, but at minimum, we try to push for 30 days between those two events. Back-to-back stage 1 and stage 2 audits often lead to significant issues. Bear in mind, we do have a 21-day cancellation policy for audits that are rescheduled late. Now, if the recommendation is that there are significant issues, but a repeat stage 1 isn't needed, this is our new conclusion option, if you will. Again, you're going to work from your audit report and address the issues that were raised, but rather than going through a repeat stage 1, you're going to be expected to send evidence of your corrected items to PJR headquarters here in Troy, Michigan. It's going to be reviewed internally by a member of our technical staff who will issue the final approval for stage 2 to be performed. So this is kind of middle ground between a full redo of the stage 1 and obviously the full approval. So that this is a new option that we've introduced. Now, if the recommendation is to proceed with stage 2, again, we recommend that you work on any concerns identified in the stage 1 report. Read through that report very carefully. If you don't address items that were raised in that stage 1 report, it's entirely possible that you're going to have nonconformances in those same areas in the stage 2 audit. Remember that your stage 1 audit in a lot of cases is going to be the only audit where you get a free shot, if you will. In other words, you're told what the little issues are and you can fix them without having to do a full-blown corrective action. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of really carefully reviewing that stage 1 audit. In conclusion, we want our clients to feel confident and comfortable with the stage 1 assessment. It is our hope that the care that's taken before the stage 1 and the support that you're going to get from your auditor and from our team here in Troy are going to help this process feel as seamless as possible. If you're a new client, we welcome you and we wish you every success in your certification journey. I do want to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. I've already mentioned the Interaction of Processes webinar. We do also have a series of webinars on ISO 9001 itself, both an introductory webinar and a webinar that goes over some of the more common issues that come up and how to be ready to address those issues. And we've got webinars on all kinds of other topics, 13485, ITF 16949, and so forth. If you'd like to be kept informed of the latest news automatically, the best way for you to do that is to visit our website at www.pjr.com. Go to the bottom of the page, enter your email address in the provided space, and click subscribe. You will be opted in for automatic updates on upcoming webinars, changes to the standards, and other points of information. I do thank you for your time. I'm going to go ahead and unlock the question portion of the dashboard here. We'll see if we have any questions today. Okay, well, wishing you all a great weekend and a great holiday. Thank you very much.